Okay, so picture one of the most glamorous love stories of the 20th century. Now imagine that for almost 2 whole decades, that love was actually considered a crime. This is the story of a romance that put one of Hollywood's absolute biggest stars in a direct fight with her country, her church, and the law itself.
And that right there, that was Sophia Loren's answer, way late in her life, when someone asked if she'd ever remarry after her husband Carlo Ponti died. That single sentence, man, it just captures the absolute, unshakable core of their entire story. A devotion that simply refused to break, no matter what it cost them.
I know it sounds dramatic, right? But for Sophia and Carlo, this was their actual everyday reality. And we're not just talking about people disapproving of them. We're talking about the very real threat of going to prison. So how on earth did they end up here? And why were they willing to risk literally everything?
All right, so let's rewind. We're going to go back to the very beginning, to this collision of two totally different worlds that would set the stage for a battle that lasted for decades.
I mean, just look at how different their lives were. It's 1950. She was Sofia Ciccoloni, just a teenager from a poor, war-torn town. He was Carlo Ponti, a mega powerful film producer, 22 years older than her, and oh yeah, he was married. He spotted her at a beauty pageant, saw her potential, and became her mentor, her protector, and of course, the love of her life.
And here's the one massive, immovable roadblock. In post-war Italy, where the Vatican had immense power, marriage was for life. Period. There was no legal way for Carlo Ponti to end his first marriage. As far as the Italian government was concerned, he was a husband for life. End of story.
You know, this wasn't just some social taboo. The law had actual names for what they were doing. If Pontiel even tried to remarry, he'd be a bigamist. And for living with a woman who wasn't his legal wife, they could both be charged with concubinage. These weren't just ugly words, they were actual criminal offenses that could land them in jail.
So this created this unbelievable paradox. As Ponti is turning Sofia into this huge international superstar, Italy is celebrating her as its greatest gift to cinema. On screen, she was a national treasure, but off screen, to the powerful establishment and the press, her relationship with Ponti basically made her a public sinner.
So by 1957, they've had enough. They just can't live in this limbo anymore. They wanted to be legitimate, so they decided to take this incredibly desperate gamble, a decision that would turn their private struggle into a massive international scandal.
And you can see right here just how fast this whole plan completely fell apart. They thought they'd found a clever loophole. Ponti's lawyers got him a divorce in Mexico, and he and Sofia were married there, and get this, it was all by proxy, which means neither of them was even in Mexico when it happened. They were probably hoping Italy would just, I don't know, look the other way. Well, they were very, very wrong.
Oh, the backlash was immediate and it was brutal. The Vatican publicly condemned them. The Italian government didn't just ignore the Mexican marriage, it used it as the reason to charge Ponti with bigamy. And Sofia, she was publicly shamed, with newspapers all over the world using that awful word, concubine.
And this is where you really see her devotion get put to the ultimate test. You gotta remember, at this exact moment, she's one of the most famous women on the planet. The Hollywood superstar Cary Grant was completely in love with her, literally begging her to leave Ponti and marry him. She could have had a much simpler, less scandalous life. But she said no. You know, her choice to stick with Ponti, it came with a huge, huge price tag, both personally and professionally. They were basically forced to live a life on the run, unable to even call their own country home. 9. Just let that number sink in. For almost a decade, they were essentially nomads, bouncing between France, Switzerland, and the United States. They couldn't go back to Italy together, because if they did, Ponti would be arrested on the spot. They were exiles from their own home.
And just think about the incredible cost of that exile. In 1961, Sophia Loren reaches the absolute top of her profession. She wins an Academy Award for the film Two Women. She's the first person in history to win for a foreign language role. It's this moment of incredible pride for Italy, and yet she can't even go home to celebrate it with the man she calls her husband.
So what do you do when your own country's laws won't change for you? Well, you change your country. In what has to be one of the most radical moves ever, they came up with this 4-step plan. They, along with Ponti's first wife Juliana, all agreed to move to France and become French citizens. Why? Simple.
French law allowed for divorce. It was this unbelievably complicated, coordinated plan just to achieve one simple thing.
And then, in 1966, 16 years after they first met, they were finally legally married in France. Their personal crime was over. But their story, well, it left behind a legacy that was way bigger than just the two of them.
When you really boil it all down, this is the conflict that defined their lives for 2 decades. The government, the law, saw their union as a criminal act. But for them, it was just a vow. It was their truth. And it was a truth they were willing to sacrifice absolutely everything for.
And here is the most unexpected outcome of this whole story. Their fight was so public, so high profile, that it forced a national conversation in Italy. Their defiance put a huge spotlight on how out of touch the laws were with modern life. And their story actually helped fuel the cultural shift that led to Italy finally making divorce legal in 1970.
After all of that, all the scandal, the exile, the legal battles, their love just kept going. They stayed married for over 40 years, right up until Carlo's death in 2007. From the moment they met until the very end, their partnership lasted for nearly 6 decades.
And so their whole story really leaves us with this one question. Sophia Loren and Carlo Ponti, they broke the rules of their church, their country, and their society. They were called criminals. But in the end, they proved that their personal truth was stronger than any law designed to keep them apart. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What rules would you be willing to break for the person you love?